Namaste and hello. Welcome to SONAS, South Asia Nadi Sambad. SONAS aims to promote dialogue and sharing of perspectives among sectors, disciplines, geographic regions, and among generations about South Asian water challenges. We believe in wholeness of the hydrological cycle as a foundation to make rivers clean for people and freshwater biodiversity. Every week, we will present our water champions' written perspective and conversation on ideas towards sustainable water solutions. I am your host Ajay Dikshit. You can find us on Twitter at Nadi Sambad. These episodes will also be available in other podcast platforms. Please enjoy the conversation. Welcome and namaste again. In today's inaugural episode, our guest is Professor Jayanta Bandyopadhyay, living in Kolkata. A scholar of international repute, Professor Bandyopadhyay's contribution to interdisciplinary water studies in South Asia, particularly in Himalaya mountain system, is exemplary. He has been advisor to the graduate programs in water diplomacy at MIT Tufts. Currently, he is Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata. Professor Bandyopadhyay, let me ask you, it has been decades that the need for integrated water resource management, IWRM, been openly accepted. Why has not it been realized yet?
I would say that there are easy practice of reductionist hydrology, reductionist engineering, which reduces the totality of water systems into small manageable segments. On the basis of that very reduced knowledge, very localized knowledge of a larger complex system, closing the eyes towards the complexity, closing the eyes towards the interlinkages, and then prescribing solutions so easily. These solutions worked a little bit, and then from late 50s to 60s, rumblings started that things are not okay. And finally, we have a very interesting document in Dublin, 1992, which says that this reductionism is not going to work in future, and we should look for a more holistic understanding of water systems, water engineering, and policy. I had been most strongly influenced by the Global Water Partnership Technical Advisory Committee, Technical Report number 4. That gave the initial thrust of yet IWRM is not an immediately applicable concept. That is where it started. And throughout the world, new thoughts of integration, but not the whole integration, but integration in smaller areas started. Work was carried out by Bruce Hooper, by Francois Moll, by many, many people. And it is difficult to give you the name. I think Water Resources Research 2006 had in each issue a very specific paper aimed at integration. And that integration is probably in the sphere of biology and water or in the sphere of sedimentology and water. So smaller areas started to be integrated. Now, it needs a tremendously sort of powerful intellectual effort to then integrate these smaller integrations into a broader integration in which we have a practicable integrated water resource management or IWRM as a methodology. To answer your question, why it has not come, the problem is created, but the solution is not found because of any laxity on the part of researchers, but they are all active. And I think continuous action is needed. Yours is one such that pushes the integration to a small dx length, and dx length over a integrated period of 0 to 1 or 0 to d will ultimately give us and is giving an increasingly integrated approach. I would not say that we wait for final product. There is already application of smaller scales of integration between ecology and economy, between law, economy, and water governance. So diverse areas of integration are already in practice. And I think in due course of time, there will be a greater level of integration from these smaller levels to a broader level when we can think of a totally new paradigm for managing and governing water resources. So I am very hopeful, but I am cautious that time should be given to this effort, which is being made throughout the world.
It's been almost 30 years, and as you rightly pointed out, there have been tremendous effort by scholars all over the world to achieve this integration, economic, social, and environmental. But somehow we have not achieved that objective. Now, in this landscape, the concept of WEBS, water, energy, biodiversity, and sediment that you've talked about. What's the linkage between this concept that you propose, WEBS, and IWRM, Integrated Water Resource Management?
My initiative is also a small effort at advancing the integration to one step. The main push that I got for this concept is a paper by Paola et al., published in Water Resources Research 2006, had a number of papers promoting the concept of integration. And Paola's paper was entitled The Synthesis of Hydrology and Geomorphology with Ecology. So this excited me. I thought that within the broad framework where from economics to sociology to law to hydrology, all issues are to be addressed in an integrated manner. Let me see whether this particular paper can be used to develop a little bit of smaller integration, that is synthesis of hydrology, geomorphology, and ecology. I have been writing on arithmetic hydrology, that you say at this point, this river carries so many cumecs of water. But when we go into water governance, that water may not be at all useful, because in South Asia, most of the water that flows in the rivers may not be always useful. So what's the point in cumecs if you do not know the water properly? What is it in it? In the dissolved state, what is being carried by the water? So I thought that what is in this flow? In the flow, there could be gaseous material dissolved, because when the rain drops through the atmosphere, it absorbs a lot of gaseous material. Example is the acid rain. It comes on the surface, it interacts with the greenery, and it absorbs a lot of biological material. And when it comes onto sort of soil and rocks, it also dissolves a lot of other chemicals. So the chemical identity must be there for water with the physical identity of cumecs. Otherwise, the incompleteness of the description is going to hamper our governance. I thought if there is quality of the water is important, then what else is there? And particularly being in South Asia and working on Himalayan rivers, I know that if the water drop falls, say at 4,000 meters above sea level, it has a tremendous potential energy, because it then goes down using that potential energy for various things, including erosion, sediment creation. So energy becomes and has traditionally been an important identity of water. Being in Nepal, at least if you go 30, 40 years, you had always the small water mills for grinding. And even today, if you go into interior, you will find those water mills.
You do.
So the energy becomes an identity also for water. Together with energy is the creation of sediments, because the energy is moving power for creation of sediments and then transportation of sediment from the upper regions to the midfields. So this is how I came to W, E, and B. Yes, they then found that on all these, there is a dependence of biodiversity in the flow. If you go to Sundarbans, the importance of the sediments in the rearing of the young fish population is clear. The fish feeds on that sediment in Sundarbans. If you go into the chemical issue, even if you do not have a chemical pollution, just two rivers with two different pH, two different chemical content can kill the biodiversity of one or the other. So water, energy, biodiversity, and sediments are possibly a package. Initial identity of a flow encourage me to think through webs.
In a way, you are suggesting that the idea of integration, which is at the downstream end, say at the use end, drinking water, irrigation, water supply, hydropower, etc., what you are suggesting is that let us think about water holistically in the upstream, where we think water in a more integrated way of having these four constituents, which is water, energy, biodiversity,
sediments and biodiversity.
So therefore, it is conceptualizing integration in a sort of a little bit of a holistic way. Is that it?
Yes, and I go back to the paper by Paula that encouraged me to think in this manner. Integration of hydrology, geomorphology, and ecology in river flows. Yeah, it is a conceptual integration.
So how would then this perspective, this web's perspective, important for water professionals working in South Asia? How can water professionals sort of, use this concept and move forward in tackling some of the, serious water crisis that we face in South Asia broadly?
I think these four elements can be a basic part of an engineering education, that when you see flows, look at quality of water, quantity of water, that is W, energy latent in it, sediments, and biodiversity. Why is it so important for South Asia, particularly the Himalayan rivers, where Bangladesh is totally dependent or getting the water? Nepal gets all its water from the Himalaya, Bhutan gets it, North India gets a lot of water from the Himalaya. Why is it so important? I always say that South Asia is a 3-month water rich and 9-month water poor region. And 3-month water rich is also damaging. It is not that availability of water. In the classical economic sense, if water is a scarce resource, then an additional volume of water will bring in a larger economic return. But in those 3 months, when everyone is flooded, if you have another additional 1 cubic meter of water somewhere, it will not give you that simple economic return. It probably will give you a negative economic return. So we have to understand that South Asia annual average picture is very misleading. We have two distinct characteristics of the South Asian water system. Now, floods. Everyone knows that between August, September, and probably a little bit in July, the South Asia is really having the problem of floods. But if you see any of our standard literature of water policy, it doesn't connect the atmosphere with hydrology. Atmosphere rainfall is a matter of the meteorology department. Only when water falls on the surface and starts flowing in a reasonable quantity, it is the matter of the hydrology. Now, if you look at, and I wrote extensively on this, Brahmaputra floods, every time we have problem with Brahmaputra floods, but we do not link the point where the South Asian summer monsoon enters Tibet through the Brahmaputra gorge, and also the East Asia summer monsoon comes from the eastern side, and both together creates a huge amount of intense daily rainfall at the upper extreme of Brahmaputra, that is in Lohit, in Dibang, and Dihang. Dihang is Siang. Now, if you do not link up atmosphere, if you do not link up the potential rainfall, if you do not use the remote sensing information and wait for the flood level to go to the danger mark, you are already late by a week. And this is our integration of atmospheric sciences, integration of the precipitation pattern, and then the flood flow. So this is how hydrology is reduced. You reduce hydrology to flowing water on the surface, but do not look back the history of that water. So this is one of the important things for South Asian water professionals. Then the whole issue of biodiversity. We use river water, store it, divert it for production of food grains. And now those food grains are not having good market, but investments have been made. And those investments are actually damaging the productivity of riverine biodiversity, that is fish. We do not have an overall economic analysis of whether the volume of water, which is in large quantities, in about 80% of the water that is going to irrigation, is possible to be reduced with higher efficiency and then reduce the damage to the biodiversity, that is fish production. This is where economics comes. This is where overall sort of prosperity of the whole river basin comes. And then administration has to take a leap jump from small district-based or state-based into a river basin-based organization. This is very important for the South Asian context, where we have to. Many countries have already gone to the level of river basin-based governance. We still not done that. So this is another important thing. The understanding of the monsoon and post-monsoon scarcity is very poor in our country. And we do not have enough. When I say my country, it is India, but as much I think it is anywhere else in South Asia. We are data starved. And whatever data is available in our country, at least in India, for Himalayan rivers, it's very difficult to obtain those data and use them. I think in South Asia, when you talk of broadening the understanding of flows, webs, it is very important that we also liberate our hydrological picture of the whole region, from the Himalaya down to the Bay of Bengal, maybe. A new science, because if you see the European roots of hydrological training in India, starting from college in Roorkee, going into University of Roorkee, IIT Roorkee, they have a European route. In Europe, if you see the hydrograph of any river, this is a flat hydrograph. When you see a hydrograph of, say, Ganga, Brahmaputra, or any of the monsoon-fed South Asian rivers, you see a vertical hydrograph, because as soon as mid-June comes, the hydrograph starts jumping up. A knowledge base created by a horizontal hydrographic system cannot guide us for very long in understanding and governing a vertical hydrographic system. This is the duty of all South Asians to develop our own water science and water governance. And some people are doing, but the governance is still very, very traditional and reductionist. So there is a great need in South Asia to understand our responsibility towards emerging concepts of IWRM, small efforts like WEBs, and then take the whole thing to a South Asia specific IWRM. If you wait for the European countries giving you water governance framework and then say this is the framework we should activate in South Asia, it will be again a mistake. And then we have to, our water professionals have to develop and deliver our own IWRM.
Thank you, Professor, for explaining that a river is an integrated entity consisting of webs, water, energy, biodiversity, and sediments, and that this collective is a direction water professionals in South Asia need to take. In the next episode, climate scientist Ken McClune of ISA International will talk about the emerging challenges of combined temperature and humidity increase in South Asia.
In Delhi, and they were like, no. India alone, there's a population that's the size of the United States that has no access to a real electricity supply. They've got electricity, the one bulb, but they won't be able to run an air conditioner on that.
Till then, have a happy week and Jai Hos.